So in the last tutorial, we left this project with just this server starting system printout. And we also did a brief overview of what an HTTP server does. How does it work? What's the process that gets a web page onto your browser? And one of the things that we saw is that the server needs to be listening at a specific port. So with that in mind, we are going to have to configure that port. One way to go about it is have a configuration file. That way we don't hard code the port that we want to use, and it gives us a little bit more flexibility. For the configuration files, we are going to use JSON, yeah? So I'll just start with creating a file, an http.json file, like this. And I'm going to say that the configuration file, for the time being, is going to have one port, which would be 80, but we are going to select 8080. And we are going to also have a web root, which I'm going to leave empty for the time being, but it's going to be a string. The web root is the place where all the files are going to live. The port is the one port that we are going to configure our server to listen to. So the next thing to do is inside this package over here, is for us to create a package called config, like so, where we are going to create the configuration manager, which is just going to be a class. And we are also going to create a file, which is configuration. This configuration is going to be the file that we are going to map that JSON to. So we know that we have a port and a web root. I'm just going to copy this over, like so. I'm going to make it private int port, this, and private string web root, like this. And now I'm going to create the getter and setter methods, like this. So this is good. This is the configuration file. So as for the configuration manager, we are going to make it a singleton. So, well, in fact, private static configuration manager, my configuration manager, like so. The reason we are using a singleton and we are using this pattern is because we don't need more than one configuration manager. We just need one, which is going to be shared across everything in the project. So we create it. This is the instance that we are going to be using. As you can see, it's static. So now I'm going to create a constructor, which has got nothing. I'm going to make this constructor private as well. And I'm going to create the get instance. Public static configuration manager get instance, like so. And I'm going to make if my configuration manager is null, my configuration manager is going to be equal to a new one. So we create it. When we do the get instance, if we don't have a configuration manager, then we just create one. Then we return the my configuration manager, like this. What else do we need? We also need for a way to load files, yeah? So we'll start with creating this new method, which we are going to call load configuration file. And we are going to give it a string, which is the file path. We won't implement this at this point, but we'll leave it like this, like so. Used to load a configuration file by the path provided, like this, and it returns nothing. Okay, and we are also going to have a method to get the configuration, the configuration that's available. Void, so get current configuration. We give it nothing, and we are going to create now the documentation for this. Returns the current loaded configuration. Okay. Both of these methods are going to throw exceptions. Yeah. In this one, it's going to return a couple of like IO exceptions in case the configuration file is not at this path or we have no permissions to read it. And this should also throw an exception when there is no configuration loaded. So we need to also create another private static variable of the type configuration, which is my current configuration. This. So we know that we are going to be reading a JSON file. Yeah? So we are going to create this class. Well, first we create the package. We're going to call this a util package, where we are going to place some util classes. And the first one is going to be the JSON class. This JSON class, in case you haven't seen the tutorial series on how to parse JSON using Java, it's going to use Jackson. So first let's add those dependencies. Dependencies, like so. Just going to make this more organized. And a dependency. Okay, it's com.fasterxml.jackson, and I want to add the core one, 2.9.9. Nice. And also the data bind, I think it's called. Come on, data bind. Good. So we keep these two. The data bind is going to allow me to transform the JSON file into a POJO, this configuration file. So for that, we are going to go into this JSON util class. And the first thing that we need straight away is an object mapper. I'm going to create a private static one. Object mapper. And I'm going to make it final because we are not going to change it. Oh, actually, I won't leave it. I won't make it final. Object mapper. I'm going to call it my object mapper. And I'm going to leave it like this for the time being. And I'm going to create a method that creates a new object mapper. I'm going to make it static. Mapper. So default object mapper receives nothing. Mapper om equals new. I'm going to make it return om, and I'm going to make this variable that we have here call this method. Going to make this private as well. Private. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure this object mapper with a deserialization option, which is fail on unknown properties as false. This is just a configuration that I like to use. That's really useful, and it makes the parsing not crash in case there is one property missing. So we'll leave it like that. And now we need to create a way to pass a string, a JSON string, into a JSON node. So I'm going to create this method, public static. I'm going to make it return JSON node, and the way I'm going to call it is pass. So string JSON source, like this. Just going to import, and I'm going to make it return using the object mapper. My object mapper, read tree, and JSON source, like this. I'm going to make it add this exception to the method signature, like this. Okay. So this is the pass, and now I need to have a way to move this JSON node into this configuration POJO. So I'm going to create a from JSON method which is also going to be public static. We don't know what type of object it's going to return, so we create a generic one like this, and I'm going to call it from JSON. And as an input, I'm going to have to give it a JSON node, so the node and the class that we want to transform it into, like this. Yeah, and the way we do this is using the object mapper as well, and calling the tree to value, and node, and the class type that we want. It's also going to throw an exception, so I'll add this to the method signature as well, like so. And just to make it more complete, I'm going to create a way of getting this configuration file into a JSON node. So I'm going to create a public static method that returns a JSON node, yeah, and it has as an input parameter an object, yeah. I'm going to call this to JSON, yeah. Let's say it's an object and object obj, like this. To do this, we also use the object mapper, my object mapper, and I'm going to use the method value to tree, yeah, and I'm going to give it an object like this. So this generates a JSON node, and it might come in handy to have a way to actually be able to see a JSON node in a string format. So I'm going to create this auxiliary method called generate_JSON, which is going to be private static string generate_JSON, and I'm going to give it a object O, this, and I'm going to use an object writer, my writer, like this, and I'm going to make the object writer write value as string of object provided, like this. Okay, I'm going to make it return this, and it can generate an exception, so we'll leave it like that. So I'm going to create a method which is also static, and now it's public because this is the method that we are wanting to call. String, I'm going to call it stringify like this. Yeah, I'll give it a JSON node, this, and I'm going to modify this one. Take a boolean pretty. I'll explain that in a second. And I'm going to make it return generate_JSON. So pass the node in and make it pretty false. This. Add exception to method signature, and I'm going to create a copy of this one, and I'm going to call it stringify pretty. I'm going to say true, and in case pretty is set, yeah, I'm going to set this object writer, yeah, to be equal to the object writer with serialization feature dot indent output, like so. So this will make it look prettier, okay? So now that we have the JSON class all built up and ready, we are going to start writing these methods for the configuration manager. The first step is to make the load configuration file method. So to start off, we need straight away a file reader. So file reader, which we are going to instantiate by giving it the file path, like so. Now we need also a string buffer. So SB, and we are going to create like so. And we are going to read everything on the file. So I'll use a while loop and do int I equals fr.read, file reader. And while it is different from -1, like so, and this is good. In fact, int I, I'll define it outside like this. So all is good, and while I read, I'll append it to the buffer like this, but I'll cast it as a char like so. Yeah, and once we have the string buffer completely full with the contents of the file, we are just going to create the JSON node. So, and I'm going to call it configuration, and I'm going to use the JSON util class that we've just created, yeah, and use the parse and use the SB to string, the string buffer, sorry, to string, like so, yeah. And then I'll assign that to my to my current configuration, using also the JSON that we've created, and from JSON I pass that node in, and I say that it is a configuration class, like this, and that's it. Now I'm just going to sort these exceptions. I'm going to add them. The file not found, which is an IO exception. The read is also going to be an IO exception, so it's probably going to replace the other one, and that's perfect. So that's the load configuration file all ready and done. Now the get configuration, I'm going to say if my current configuration is equal to null, I'm going to have to do something inside here. Otherwise, I'm going to return my current configuration. And I'm going to have to change the method signature so that it returns a configuration. In here, I'm going to throw a new HTTP configuration exception. We don't have this class yet, so I'll just create it now. Class like this, I'm going to call it this. And I'm going to say it extends exception. In fact, I'm going to call it a runtime exception. Yeah? And I'm going to create the constructors. We don't need all of them, but I'll just create them anyways. I'll delete this one. And here I'm going to say no current configuration set. So that's good. Now for the load configuration, I'm also going to remove this throws IO exception over here, and I'm going to surround this bit with try catch like this. And when it's a file not found exception, I'm going to throw a new runtime exception. A new HTTP configuration exception. I'm going to say that's the file not found exception, that's the cause, and leave it like that. This is an IO, so I'll just surround that with try catch as well. And I'm going to throw a runtime exception over here as well. And for this one, the parse is going to be, which kind is it? So it's an IO as well. Perfect. I'll surround with try catch and throw this as well. And I'm going to say error parsing the configuration file with that cause, and surround with try catch. Let's say error parsing the configuration file internal. This is just to make it different from the other one, from this one over here, so that we know that it's a different kind of exception. And that's it. That's it done. We have the load we have the configuration manager. Now it's just a question of actually using it. So to start using the configuration manager, we just call it. We do the get instance, obviously, because it's a singleton, and we make load configuration file. Because we are going to be executing on this path here, simple HTTP server, I'm going to give it a relative path to that. So sources/main resources/http.json, like so. Let's just give it a run to see what happens. And it's good. Now we go and grab it to see what happens. So get current configuration, conf, and let's just use the system out print line to see if we're reading the file correctly. So we print the port, like so, and using web root, we save and we give it a run. Oh, web root is not being passed correctly. Oh, is it? Oh, it is. Let me just TMP, like so. Let's just see. Perfect. So now we have the configuration manager. And this is the boring part done. We will extend the configuration manager in the next steps to add further things. In the next tutorial, we are going to start working with server sockets, well, in sockets in general, and we're going to start to see this server working properly with a browser and stuff. So don't forget to subscribe to get notified of the next videos, and I hope you enjoyed.